I was so embarrassed for this deep calling that I had. And I was so ashamed that all I wanted to do was make art and create stuff. And everybody else around me was doing normal things and leaving, the childish antics of art in the past where it belongs. And I was unable to get over it. And I was looking around, especially as I started leaving university and was expected to get into the workforce. And I started doing all these different jobs and I could never last for very long. And all I wanted to do was write my books. And I was like, what is wrong with me? This calling is strong. I have no tolerance for work that does not light me up. I wanted to make stuff. And there's a stubbornness within me, Anna, that it was unrelenting. And there was also a faith that if I was being this strongly called to create, then it must mean something.
Welcome to How to Trust Yourself, the podcast for anyone who's done with the endless second guessing and ready to tune in to your inner guidance. I'm Anna Holtzman, and I get that feeling of trudging through life like you're wading through mud, trying to figure out which way to go. In my 20s, I spent more time asking what should I do with my life than writing about crushes or bad dates in my journal. I've tried on a lot of answers: architecture, publishing, editing reality TV for a decade, and finally landing on therapy and coaching, helping people like you connect with your purpose. But here's the thing I've learned through all those twists and turns. Trusting yourself is the key to moving forward, even when the path feels messy. So if you're ready to stop doubting yourself and start listening to your gut, you're in the right place. Let's dive in. Welcome back, dear listener. Today's guest is someone whose words have inspired hundreds of thousands of creatives to step fully into their artistic identity, and I know she's going to inspire you too. Amie McNee is a writer, speaker, and creative coach whose mission is to dismantle the limiting narratives that hold artists back. Through her books, courses, workshops, and online community, she helps creatives build the courage to choose themselves and their art without waiting for permission. Her new book, We Need Your Art, is a powerful call to action, reminding us that creative work isn't just a hobby or a luxury, it's essential. And yet so many of us struggle with the fear of being seen, of not being good enough, or of simply not knowing where to begin. In this conversation, Amie shares her own journey as well as practical tools that you can use for trusting yourself as an artist and building a sustainable creative practice. And I'll be honest, I was ridiculously excited for this conversation. I've been such a fan of Amie's work for so long that I wasn't entirely sure I'd be able to keep my cool, so I might sound a little goofy. If you have ever felt the pull to create but hesitated because of self-doubt, this episode is so for you. Let's get into it. Amie, thank you so much for being here. It's such a thrill. As I said before we started to record, I'm going to try not to fangirl too much because I've been following your work for so long and I am such a huge fan. So thank you so much for being here with me and the listeners of this podcast.
Truly a privilege. I cannot wait to chat. And I'm just very grateful for you, Anna. So thank you.
That feels so nice to hear. I'm very grateful for you and your work. And I know that a lot of the listeners of this podcast are already familiar with your work, but there will also be plenty of them who are meeting you for the first time through this conversation. So for those folks, I will have introduced you before our conversation plays, but could you say a little bit about what you do? You do a bunch of different things and who your work is for, who it helps, etc.
Yeah, beautiful. So I speak mostly about the creative process, but the reason I get to, write books about what it means to take our art seriously and why I get to work with artists is because I am a fiction author and I tell stories. And I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to be a novelist. And along this difficult journey of trying to make it as a storyteller, a professional storyteller, I started speaking about the creative journey and what it's like to take your art seriously and the difficulties and the beauty of that path. And as I did that, I found community. And I realized that this is something we absolutely must talk about. We absolutely need to have other artists be in the same room as us, and we need to share the wild, beautiful, very difficult journey that is doing this, that is making stuff, that is sharing our art. And so, by chance, as I made a career for myself as a fiction author, I also made this beautiful, amazing, unexpected life of also talking about the creative journey.
Amazing. And it's your work helps so many people. Like, I share your work with so many of my coaching and therapy clients in all walks of life, both who work in the arts and who don't, and who, all across the board. Um, I'm curious. I want to ask this question that I always ask guests, which is like, what led you to the work that you do? But I don't know if there is also was there some sort of turning point when you decided to take art seriously? Because as you talk about frequently, there's just so many cultural barriers to that and like messaging that we get that quote unquote, this isn't a serious path.
Mm. Yeah, this has been such a big part of my journey and such a big part of the work that I share, is that I was so embarrassed for this deep calling that I had. And I was so ashamed that all I wanted to do was make art and create stuff. And everybody else around me was doing normal things and leaving, the childish antics of art in the past where it belongs. And I was unable to get over it. And I was looking around, especially as I started leaving university and was expected to get into the workforce. And I started doing all these different jobs, and I could never last for very long. And all I wanted to do was write my books. And I was like, what is wrong with me? Like, this calling is strong. Like, I have no tolerance for work that does not light me up. I wanted to make stuff. And there's a stubbornness within me, Anna, that it was unrelenting. And there was also a faith that if I was being this strongly called to create, then it must mean something. And so it was really in my early 20s that this started happening. But it's taken a long time to remove the shame that I had about not being able to grow up and be a real human being, a real adult in inverted commas. And it took me many, many years of understanding that we live in a culture that has sold us a lie about the pursuit of art, and that creativity is something to be taken very seriously. And it is a very valid form of work, and it is important, and it is serious, and that art is absolutely for adults.
Yeah, I love that. I'm like, yes, I want to beat my chest and say yes. And I'm curious about something because listening to you share what you just shared, and I think you said something along the lines of like, I could not tolerate work that does not light me up. And it reminded me of something from my experience. So I'll share it very briefly, and I'm curious if you relate in your own way. So I got into therapy and coaching initially as a chronic pain therapist, and I had my own experience with I used to work in TV, and I was getting these migraine headaches for years, and it got worse and worse and worse till I literally couldn't go on in that work. And I was sort of forced to find work that lit me up because it was like I was physically in pain. And I'm curious if, like, you feel like relate to this idea that it's both like a calling that you're being drawn toward and also sort of like that blessing and curse sensitivity that I just cannot tolerate what doesn't feel right to me.
It resonates so deeply with me, Anna. And I think it is a blessing and a curse, because I was so similar, and I call it an intolerance for a life that didn't sparkle.
Yeah.
And I just had an intolerance. I also had a lot of experience with chronic pain,
Yeah.
living life outside of integrity, outside of alignment. And
Yeah.
I think we see a lot of creative people who have very sensitive bodies, very sensitive minds, who try to squish this part of them out of themselves, and we see the repercussions. And so we're
Yeah.
sold this story that it's not safe to pursue a life of art. But then when we don't pursue a life of art, most of us are getting sick, we're getting depressed, we're getting anxious. Like, it's physically hurting our bodies.
Yeah.
And so it really isn't safe to ignore the creative calling. It's the opposite of safe. But I felt so similarly. And I felt very embarrassed about how sensitive I was, because I was like, everybody else seems to be able to tolerate it, but I can't tolerate it. And similar to my partner, he felt very similarly. Like he had, he tried to work in corporate for a week and he was violently ill. Some of us are just more attuned. And it's
Yes.
often the artists who are more attuned.
I relate to that description so much that some of us are, you could say, more sensitive, and oftentimes we hear or we think, because we've internalized it, this idea of like, oh, I'm overly sensitive and there's something wrong with me. But the flip side of that, or just another way of looking at it, is a high level of attunement to when
Things
your
aren't
life
right.
is out of alignment. Yeah,
Yes. Yeah.
completely.
Me and my partner James have been talking about this a lot, because James has autism, and I think that also adds a little bit to it. But he has this, like, as soon as he's out of integrity, he's out. He's like, something's wrong. So on a day by day basis, if something isn't in integrity, he's like, I am out. And how interesting. And it's a burden for him, because there's a lack of resiliency that he struggles with, because as soon as something's not quite aligned, he cannot tolerate it. But it is also a beautiful blessing, because it constantly pulls you back on track, because you are unable to be off track.
I relate to that so much. And I won't go on too much of a tangent with this, but I feel like my husband and I, our relationship has blossomed because both of us have such a high sensitivity to being out of alignment with each other, which caused just like nightmarish friction for the first
Yes.
year and a half. But we kind of can't get into a blah period because we just
You have to
can't
be in
tolerate it.
alignment.
Yeah, totally.
I know. Maybe, I mean, artists, maybe we are the most intolerant people, and maybe that's what makes us artists.
So, here's a related topic I'd love to get your take on. So many of the clients that I work with, and this is similar to my experience, which is why I work with these folks, they and I experience this like really intense desire to be seen, known, heard, like to creatively express ourselves, to share that out in the world. And simultaneous with that is this super intense fear of it. And, it's interesting because being out of alignment can show up in all kinds of emotional and physical symptoms. And at the same time, it's like that fear of expression can also cause this like tension and constriction. And I'm curious, I'd love to hear you talk about how you navigate this and maybe even how you help others navigate this, because I know you do.
This is such a juicy topic. I think most artists are more afraid of success than they are of failure, and it's not something we think about very much. In fact, I think most of us are completely unaware that we are simultaneously running from failure and from success at the same time, and it can cause like an absolute shit show of an experience, because we're trying to avoid both ends of the spectrum. Because I think many of us like crave to be seen, but are also terrified of being seen. And understanding that and coming to terms with how we navigate that is incredibly challenging. For me, I think a big part of the work I do with creatives is not preparing to fail. I just want people to expect to fail. Like, this is it. It's a mandatory part of this process.
Yeah.
But like, we can do a bit of work on that. But what really needs to be done is we need to prepare for success. And I need you to understand how you're going to navigate being witnessed and seen and perceived. I need you to understand what boundaries you're going to need to have in place when you are putting your art out there in the world. Like, how are you going to handle that and navigate that? No one's prepping for success. No one is. And so we're getting hit in the face with sudden abundance and not knowing what to do with it. And so no one really wants to hear me talk about this. It's not a super popular topic, which I find interesting.
That
No,
is fascinating to me.
yeah.
I'm the most interested in this. Yeah.
I think people don't like the idea of I think people struggle to really see that the creative
Yeah.
success could be theirs. So they don't even want to contemplate it. They feel like it's jinxing it, or they feel like it's a conversation that's not for them. But
Yeah.
because we constantly sideline this conversation of, well, what will success look like for us as an artist? We're never prepared for it. And it often fucks us up. And it often ends up that we are unconsciously trying to avoid it in many ways. Very big topic.
Oh my
Important
gosh. I
topic.
mean, the way you talk about this is I'm like, my brain is all tingling and there's like screens going out on all sides. And I think it's so interesting that you said that a lot of people don't want to hear you talk about this. Um, I'm reminded of like I've been fairly recently like reading more about the connection between our nervous system and our relationship with money, and
Mm.
how like there's this similar thing where like we fear having not enough, but what many of us don't realize is that we also fear having more than our nervous system is sort of prepared for, and so there's this kind of like acclimation
So
process.
interesting. I don't think my partner would mind me talking about this, but I've always been someone who really struggles with not having enough money. And
Yeah.
so as my career's grown, I've felt safer and safer. My partner, and I never saw this coming, he always had really good money stories. Now
Mm.
that we've moved into a more abundant financial situation, absolute meltdown.
Oh, so interesting.
So interesting. And it's completely
So
flipped.
interesting.
And whereas I was the really money anxious person initially, now James is. And like, what a fascinating thing to happen and so intriguing.
Super, super interesting. I I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about, how do you help people prepare themselves for success and kind of, like, sidle up to it and
Yeah.
get a little more comfortable with it?
Yeah. So we have to start thinking about it. We have to start thinking about what we want from success. And I think that's a
Yeah.
really important part of it. We've grown up in scarcity cultures as creatives. So we're told any success we get, we got to grab it. We've got to hold on to it. And it doesn't matter if we don't even really like it. Like you've got to get whatever you can get. And so
Yeah.
you see a lot of creatives taking deals they don't want, having terrible standards, like, absolutely giving everything to their audience. There are no boundaries. Like it's a scarcity mindset of if I say no, I will never get anything back again. Any little bit of what looks like a glimmer of success, I must grasp at. And we have to shift that mindset because that is a recipe for a truly miserable creative life. So
Oh,
we need to define what it is we want as successful creatives because we've been sold a lot of stories as to what the successful creative will look like. And we don't have to accept that. That doesn't have to be our version of it. So, what is it you actually want is a really big part of the question and really examining it. Like, how much money do you actually want? How much of a connection to your audience do you actually want? What boundaries do you want to have in place? And just start listing them, like, start prepping your future life and understanding that we have control over the sort of success we get to experience.
yeah, the way you're talking about this part of things, it reminds me a lot of this idea that kind of emerged, I don't know, like, when I was already an adult, this idea of, continuous consent when it comes to sex,
Oh, interesting.
right? Because they're
Mm.
like, I had grown up with this, whether I thought about it or not, this idea that, well, if you
If you
say
start,
yes to starting, then it's like there's no brakes on the car
yes,
anymore, and
I
that's
love that.
terrifying. Yeah.
Yeah, we get to change the terms and conditions all the time. And
Yeah.
again, I think we've been conditioned into this narrative that the artist is just, we're at the behest of gatekeepers, we're at the behest of systems. Like we get bashed around, we get told that we're just like kind of the tool for big money to use, big corporations to use. And we need to reclaim our value. We need to reclaim the understanding that we're the ones that make things and we get to set the terms and we get to change the terms whenever it is we want. And that there is enough out there for us that we don't need to grab at anything we possibly can see, that we need to trust that we get to dictate the terms of our success.
Yes.
I was watching the Taylor Swift documentary years ago now, and I remember there's just a moment where she said, oh, I think she basically said, I can't have kids because I'm contracted in. And I
Right.
was like, this ain't success. This isn't success. She's like, I can't do this. And, we look at these big celebrities and you watch any of those documentaries and that can't be success for me anyway. Like
Yeah.
my big standard for success is autonomy. And
Oh,
when I
it's
look at,
yeah.
and I look at those creatives and I think they're not, that ain't it. And they feel so trapped. And we get to dictate the terms before we get to those situations. And that's part of, this is a huge conversation about bringing the power back to the artist. Like it's revolutionary. But we need to have these conversations now so that when we get big, baby, we can say, I will not be fucked with.
Yeah, and I mean, the wild thing is, well, I don't know, I just think this is an interesting thing, is that success or like a career in the arts, any kind of career
Mm.
is about relationships, right? This is all relational stuff. And so if like those kind of dynamics, like I can't even have control over my own body because I'm contracted, like hopefully we understand by now that if those kind of dynamics show up in an intimate relationship, that's very
Yes.
poisonous. And
Yes.
like I think we need to really borrow that knowledge now and put it into our work life and our creative life.
What an amazing connection that you've just made there, Anna. I love that. You're right. I think we need that power, that autonomy back over our bodies, over our work, over our creative lives, and it has been robbed of us historically. And it's our job to prep for it now so that we can have a future of artists that does do this differently.
Yes, because no one else is actually like, that phrase, like, no one's coming to save you. No one's coming to get
Mm.
this clarity for you. Although there are people who can help you and support
Yes.
you and encourage you like you do.
Mm.
And like, yeah, what are there certain practices? I know you're big on journaling, which I'm
Mm.
super into journaling.
Yeah.
Um, are there kind of like inching out into the world steps that you encourage people to take?
Yeah. This is such a big conversation. I've got thoughts coming out everywhere at
Oh,
the moment.
please. Okay,
I
go
just
with
want
it.
to
Yeah.
caveat that what
Yeah.
I'm saying here is we are in many ways like creatives are victimized by these systems, and
Yeah.
just continuing that relation back to the sexual comparison is it's not our fault. And I just want to remind everyone that it's not our fault, and we need to know our
Absolutely.
power, but there is a structural problem for a lot of us. And
Absolutely.
it's they're fucked up, and I'm so sorry that we have to be the ones that advocate for ourselves, but we do need to know our power as we navigate systems that are very broken.
Yeah, I'm
um
so glad you said that too, because they're like, yeah, in all of these areas of life, whether it's chronic pain or whether it's like our sexual experiences or whether it's our creative life, our professional life, um, when we experience that feeling of helplessness, um, it's just so easy to then on top of that get mad at ourselves about it and
yes,
beat ourselves up
exactly.
and then like,
I
that's
mean, I've
understandable, but it doesn't really help.
Totally, it does not help. I mean, through my navigating, I've just had, I mean, We Need Your Art has come out with a publisher. It's been my first navigation with a big
Yeah,
publisher. And I was so ready for this publishing deal because I
yeah,
had prepped everything, because I was ready for success. I knew the terms that I was ready to agree with. And they
yeah.
came to me with the terms that I was ready to agree with. They literally said, I know that you don't need us, but dot, dot, dot. Which was incredible. And like, these are the things that I want for all artists. But even then, I fucked a few things up, and I let my power be taken away just because I was ignorant to the systems, just because this is a big machine that's been working for hundreds of years, to extract value out of artists.
Yeah,
And I need to make sure that, like, even though that's not my fault, that's not my fault. And I
yeah.
just have to learn for that from next time.
Yeah, I love that, and I mean, I think you're already speaking to this, but, like, how do you, walk yourself back to, "Okay, so, like, I didn't do that, or I did
Mm,
this, and, like, what now, and how do I tend to myself and move on
yeah.
from here?"
As you said, Anna, like, a huge amount of my work is done through journaling. That's how I take care of myself. That's how I prep
Yeah,
for success, because it allows me to have conversations with myself. Not, it allows me to distance myself from me so I can have a less chaotic conversation, which happens in my head all the time, but actually have a conversation on the pages of my journal, which is a lot more methodical. It's still a bit crazy, but there's a lot more space on the pages. So the journaling allowed me to cultivate a voice that took care of me, and that allowed me to have power, and that asked me questions about what I wanted, rather than just accepting what was given to me. It allowed me a space to take care of an inner critic who was out of control.
yeah.
And I rewrote my brain on the pages of my journal, really.
I relate to that so intensely, and what brought me into journaling actually was that when I was struggling with migraine headaches, because I learned from a few different people in the chronic pain field that, like, a lot of people were using journaling to recover, and so I first, started using I mean, it was helpful to me straight from the beginning, but my relationship with it evolved, and initially, I was sort of using journaling out of desperation, trying to fix this problem, and there was sort of a turning point that came eventually where I never had realized before that I could choose to say all the things to myself that I wished someone else would say. I
That's
wonder if
exactly what
you
happened
had
to
that
me.
kind of, yeah.
It was like, oh my God, like I just want someone to take care of me. And then I was like, wait a minute. And I have a very compassionate and motherly and tender voice that comes on the pages of my journaling. And now that lives with me as I navigate my days. It's very parental. I essentially rewrote a parental voice for me to carry around wherever I go. Because I think as we do something as vulnerable as create, like it's a very childlike, because it's so vulnerable. You feel so exposed. So you almost need that like older, wiser, it's okay, baby, you're doing such a good job. I know this is really hard, but I'm so proud of you. That kind of voice, that's basically all I say to myself in my journals.
I love this so much. And I wonder if like your students, your readers, the folks that you connect with, do you ever experience like resistance to this idea of like, well, I can't, kind of like I can't be nice to myself until someone else is nice to me?
Totally. This is one of the biggest barriers I have, because it's
Yeah.
very easy to say, I just need you to be nice to yourself on the pages of your journal. But for a lot of people, it has not been ever demonstrated to them. They do not know what it looks like to be kind to themselves. And so cultivating this voice is difficult. And for a lot of people, I think it feels very fake for a very long time, but I don't think it matters. I think just move through the fake. Eventually it starts feeling real. It really does. But you have to be able to sit with that discomfort of like, oh, do I deserve this? This is stupid. I don't even believe it. Like moving through that's very challenging.
Totally. And I completely agree that it doesn't have to. What I experienced in my own journey with this is that I realized at some point that I could write the loving words down on the page, and whether or not I was feeling connected with those words or not when I was saying them, when I heard them, like that didn't matter because
Mm.
hearing them felt so good. It
Mm.
was like the receiving them part.
So beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard. I also call the practice mothering. And I think for a lot of people, the mother is like a big wound. And so when we haven't had parents who've demonstrated that kind of language. And when we are parenting from scratch, like we're self-parenting from scratch with nothing to work with, it's incredibly difficult. And I was privileged to have, amazing parents, faulted and imperfect, but amazing. So I did have something to work with, but I can't comprehend what it could be like to never have had received that from a parental figure and then to have to rewrite it from scratch. But I've seen people do it, and I've seen people create and love themselves in the way that they actually deserved to always be loved. And what a fucking powerful thing to have done.
So fucking powerful. The most
The
powerful
most, the
thing.
most, yeah. Like, oh my God, you did it.
Absolutely. Um, so I want to talk about your latest book, which you've already mentioned. This is by no means your first book, whether in the realm of fiction or nonfiction, but I'm going to hold
Oh,
it
look at
up
that
because
baby. It's so nice that she's
it's
out now.
so beautiful. I've got two of these.
Yay.
A few of my clients have these from me,
Oh,
and
this is
the rest of
music to
them
my
should
ears,
all
Anna.
get them. Yes. I was so excited that because I've been, yeah, just so excited that this is in a
Look at her.
book that can be shared. And the book is called We Need Your Art. Could you speak a bit to the title of the book and what
Mm.
that means?
I said it for the first time probably like 5 or 6 years ago. And I think as I said it, I was like, oh, like this is something that people really fucking need to hear.
Yeah.
I think it's very easy to hear this phrase, we need art. It's not that easy, but it's easier to get your head around. Like, yeah, we need art. That makes sense. But for me to sit you down and say, I need your art, like we need your art, is you'll see a million shame stories like ricochet up and a million reasons why I don't need your art. And it provokes like this defense that is so acute. And that's the shit I want to sit down and talk with. And I want to understand it. I want to break through it. And I want to move through that journey with you so that you understand that we absolutely do need your art. But that's a long journey that we need to go on. And that's why I wrote the book.
Yeah. I mean, I could even just as you were talking, and I'm like fully sold on every freaking word you say in the book. And as I was listening to you talking just now, it's like, oh, I feel those shame stories rise
Yeah,
up
like
in me.
when I ask you and when I say this to you, I
Oh
need your
yeah.
art. We need your art. What comes up for you?
Oh yeah. Like my I'll just share like exactly what comes up for me,
Yeah,
knowing
yeah.
that like these are just different
They're
flavors.
yeah.
They're just different ice cream flavors of like the shit that comes up for all of us.
Mm.
So for me, it's like your life wasn't difficult enough to make a
Ah,
compelling story.
yeah.
Your life wasn't interesting enough. It hasn't been interesting enough to make a compelling story. Um, when you go to write, you feel like a deer in the headlights and you blank out. And the second part of that is so that means you have nothing interesting to say,
Ah. I
right?
mean, and how I mean, it's hard and difficult, but how incredibly interesting. And like we get to work through those stories now. And understanding this defense response that comes up is so important and so fruitful. And thank you for sharing that. I think it's so interesting. Um, but that's what happens when you tell people we need your art, just like a million excuses. And I want to work with those excuses.
How do you okay, I'm just gonna share how, like, I because of my chronic pain experience, and it was just not just my personal experience, but that became my work then for many years, was helping folks recover from chronic pain, so that it just kinda gave me, like, a language and a lens that
Mm.
I've carried forward into everything, and I found it helpful to start to say to myself when those fears come up, because they do, like, 20 million times a day, um, I name them either as symptom, because that's sort of like
Ooh,
my
I
brain,
like that. Yeah.
and symptom is equivalent to fear, so I'll also just name it as fear.
Mm.
And then in my journaling practice, I'll have a whole conversation with the fear, like, I'll sit
I
down with
love
it, like,
that.
it's gotta slow down with it, right?
That's so beautiful.
I'm curious if you have kind of, I don't know, like a catch-all term for, because there's so many different flavors of those stories, right?
Mm.
How do you conceptualize them for yourself?
Um, I view them as so initially I viewed them as like the villain,
Oh,
and it was not useful.
yeah.
And now I envisage them as a little, maybe 5, 6 year old me, absolutely cracking the shits.
Yeah.
Like she's having a real moment. And so I sit down and I get down and I cross my legs on the floor and I'm like, what's happening? Why do you think that? Where's that come from? Oh, baby, that's really hard. I understand. That's not true, though. That's not true. And it's again, it's that I'm just constantly treating myself like a child, which is very ironic because my whole childhood and teenage years, I absolutely abhorred being young. And all I ever wanted to do was to be old. And now I am just constantly treating myself like a little baby.
Yeah, and it's such a, that energetic shift from treating that part as the villain, like, there's nowhere you can get to from that. It's just, like,
It's just
constant war.
it's just hating part of yourself, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
So aggressive. And so yeah, treating that part like I have these thoughts. Like if you tell me that you need my art, like I'll have thoughts that pop up, you know?
Yeah.
The other day I literally said to James, my partner, I said, I don't have anything good to say. And I was like, I don't know why people listen to me. I don't have anything good to say. Like these thoughts come up all the time. And learning to sit down with that part of me and going, baby, why are you saying that? What's happening? Has been transformative.
I'm I'm actually getting so much out of the fact that you just said that, and, like, this is something that I'm always very open with the folks that I work with, I that self-doubt is not something that I kick to the
We don't
curb and
graduate from it,
solve with
baby.
journaling. Yeah, like, it's not about getting rid of it, it's about developing a practice of, relating with ourselves, and even, I preach this, and like this, I mean, this brings it full circle. I think it's like, and I'm human and I have all these self-doubts. And then you're
Yes.
like hearing you say it. Like we all need to hear someone else say it in addition to
Oh my
ourselves.
God, we do. And I think it's a shame that when we often see creatives further down the line, that you don't hear a lot of that part of the story because this is not something we
Yeah.
graduate from. And I think a lot of the times creatives are seeking that external validation because they think that will cure it forever. The doubt
Yes.
will go.
Oh, like it's a disease or like
Yes,
it's like an appendage that you can hack off.
exactly.
Yeah.
But the thing is that artists do vulnerable work, and vulnerability will always provoke doubt, and you cannot inoculate yourself from it. Therefore, if you're going to make vulnerable art for the rest of your life, you will always have a relationship with the little afraid child. Always have a relationship with that little afraid child who says random shit like, I don't think you have anything good to say anymore. And you're going to have to sit down with that child when you're, in your 30s and when you're in your 80s. And so have a way to speak to that part of yourself, because you can't cure it.
Yes. Oh, I just wrote down, you said vulnerability will always provoke doubt. And I wanted to write that down because it's so, I think when the doubt comes up, it's so easy to be led into, I mean, doubt provokes doubt, right? So it can just become this downward spiral. And so it's so easy to start following that spiral by saying, well, because I'm feeling doubt, that means that I'm not cut out for this.
Yes.
Yeah.
It can be a terrible downward spiral. And that's why we need these little ways to catch ourselves, because it's also exhausting. And the more tired you get, the little resources you have. And then you're just like, fuck it, I'm fucked, whatever.
Right. And then you're like, this is proof. I have no creative inspiration anywhere in my body.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we need little ways to catch ourselves, or to at least detach,
Yeah.
so that we're not taking everything so seriously.
So one of you have many themes that you've been writing on, preaching on, developing, and deepening over the years. And one of those themes that is just an absolute favorite of mine is this idea of choosing yourself.
It's my
Like the
favorite too.
importance. I love it. I used to have when I was in graduate school to become a therapist, I had this one professor who she would speak in these kind of obtuse ways sometimes, but she'd always talk about authorizing yourself. And she had this very like elegant way of talking. And she was like, you'd say something and she'd be like, you authorized yourself to say that. And
That's
it would
cute. I
really
like
freak me
it.
out, but I loved it. Yeah.
I like the word authority.
Yeah.
And I like being the authority in my own life. And I see a lot of, outside of my creative realm, I saw it even today. Here's an example. We were at a bookstore today and I got a book that I wanted to buy, and I showed my partner and he didn't really have a response to it. And I was like, do you think I should not buy this? And it's like, why am I asking for permission to buy this fucking book? Like, just buy the book, like be the authority in your own life, Amy. But I think, and it's something I work on all the time, because I'm often like just not the one on the throne. I'm like checking in with everyone else that it's okay to do what I want to do. And obviously this is a really big theme in creativity, because we've always been told that if you want to do something as daring as make art, someone better fucking have given you permission. Whereas the reality is that you can go down that route, but you will always be searching for self-authority, and you will always feel like something is missing, and you will crave external validation so heavily because you never gave the validation to yourself. And if we can start this journey, or at least like right now, claim self-given permission, our own authority, our own coronation, it is one of the most powerful things you can do as an artist.
So when I first came across, it was Instagram posts of yours that I came across that were talking about this idea of choosing yourself, anointing yourself. And it just kind of freaking blew my mind. It was like fragments of skull were just like all over the room. And I don't know if it was a new idea to me, but certainly the way that you were talking about it felt new and like revolutionary, and my head exploded. And I wonder if you could even say, like, how you came to that, or yeah.
Yeah, as you say that, I'm like, when did I make this up? And then I was like, have I stolen something? I don't know, Anna. It's been such a big journey for me, and picking myself as an author has been pivotal. And so I think it's just over time, I must have been like, everything changed the moment I said, you're allowed to do this without anyone's permission. As an author, I racked up hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rejection letters, and I was told no, or straight out ignored, by so many people. And I just kept asking, can I do this? Am I allowed to do this? Is this a valid way to spend my life? Permission, 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 just begging for someone to say yes.
Yeah.
And no one gave it to me. And so the choices were either you, and as we've previously spoken about, you live a life outside of integrity, which was not available to me because I couldn't fucking stick it,
Yeah.
or I had to give permission to myself. And I had to self-anoint, coronate, and do shit by myself. And that came with a lot of shame for me because it's so ironic. I saw giving myself permission, for example, self-publishing, taking up space without anybody saying I'm allowed to take up space. I thought that was a last resort. I thought that was the worst thing that could possibly happen. But it was actually, that is the most powerful thing I've ever done. It was the best business decision of my life. It was the best financial decision of my life. It was the best spiritual decision of my life. Like, everything changed the moment I said, well, if you don't want me, whatever, I know I have something to give. I will take up space without your permission. And so I was an artist without permission. And I started taking up space and I took myself seriously without them. And it was fucking very cool.
So fucking cool and so inspiring. I mean, so inspiring to so many people. Like, it just such a great example of when we give ourselves permission to do the thing that we're like, everyone's going to be mad at me. And I mean, yeah, maybe some people will be mad. Who freaking cares? But like, when we give ourselves permission, it goes so much bigger than just ourselves, because anyone who's in our orbit gets some of that permission too.
Oh my God, there's nothing so brave as to being like a self-anointed artist out loud. Being an artist out loud is incredibly brave because you remind people, oh my God, like I also could create. But being a self-anointed artist out loud, it gives people the permission slip of, oh my God, I don't need to wait for anyone to tell me I'm allowed to do this by myself. And it can provoke really shitty responses because I think it's triggering for people. Oh, I didn't realize you could do this without anybody saying you could do this, you know? And I get that a lot. I fucking hated telling people that I self-publish because the first question is nearly always, what do you do? I'm an author. Oh, who publishes you? I publish myself. Oh, that's nice. Oh, that's nice. Does it make you any money? Shut the fuck up. But they're saying, who gave you permission? Who gave you permission? And when you say, I gave myself permission, you do provoke funny responses, but you also shine very brightly and you're allowing other people to realize that they can do this too, which is a profound act of generosity.
You know, it's like, talking about this, I'm like, I knew obviously that this thing that you talk about made a big impact on me. That's why I brought it up. But as we're talking about it, I'm like, just remembering things even more. It's kind of becoming more vivid. And I'm like, hearing you, reading you talk about this, it changed my nervous system's reaction to self-publishing completely, because I used to have that kind of shame association with it, which is cultural.
Yeah.
Obviously,
We're
right?
learned. It's taught.
It's learned and it's taught. And then I learned something different from you, right? Like, we can, like, these associate, we're not popped out of the womb thinking self-publishing is a shameful thing. Like, we don't have any idea about it. We learn an idea.
We do.
And anything that can be learned can be rewritten.
So beautiful.
You can learn something new.
Yes, I love this shifting narrative around self-publishing now. I mean, we're seeing some of the biggest authors in the world do it.
Yeah.
And it's very exciting. It's a changing space. Like, publishing is really interesting right now because we're seeing people and artists reclaim their value. I think what it is, hey, I'm the one that writes these books. I'm the one who creates the value. Why am I being dicked around? And so we see this reclamation. And so self-publishing is an announcement. It's saying, I'm valuable and I will do it myself.
And when you do that, it's like, yeah, many people will be triggered by that. But I mean, this is just my experience that I'll share. But I think when I feel triggered by something like that, the trigger is this, it's like the resentment of like, why haven't I decided to value myself earlier when I actually could?
Who do you think you are? It's often oh my God, like, why don't I think that much of myself?
Yeah. Totally. And I'm remembering too, like, kind of a thought process that I went through while ingesting your like missives about this choosing yourself. Because I remember at first I was like, I really, like, I'm drawn to this, and this feels right and good, and like I like the energy of this, but I'm feeling that resistance inside of like, but isn't that kind of cheating? And like,
Mm.
and that's not really legitimate. And I'm like, and I was like, I got to sit here and think about like, what is this actually about? And I thought about how in my 20s, I was actually a junior magazine editor for a while.
You've had a big life, haven't you?
I'm like the queen of pivots. I've had many, many career pivots. Um, yeah, but what was my point? Yeah, so I mean, I wasn't like that high up, but whatever. I was in a gatekeeping position of sorts, and
Mm.
I'd have people pitch me things, and I'd say yes or no. And I mean, I value my taste and my opinion, but I'm only one fucking person. Like, I am not there's no way I would ever see myself as like the the god of like
Mm.
what's worthy and what's not worthy, or
Yes.
whatever. Like, I chose things that fit with what I needed to get done in that month's
Yes.
issue. And I was like, is that the kind of thing I wanna place my self-worth in? Just, like, random whims
Random?
or timing, or, like, there was an advertising theme that we needed to stick to that month, you
Yes.
know?
I know we glorify these institutions that have the power to pick us.
Yeah.
And it's so fucking arbitrary. Like you peek behind the curtain for 1 second and you realize it's so random. I spent like
Totally.
maybe literally 2-3 months as like a slush pile reader for a publisher.
Yeah.
Motherfucker. It just depended on what I fucking felt like reading, didn't it? So random. But it's very hard to understand that. And, we all have that deep desire to be chosen. And I still
Yeah.
have a huge desire to be chosen. And I see it every day. I am someone who really loves to be witnessed and I love to be understood and I love to be appreciated. And so when I'm chosen, I get a huge fucking rush. But so because I have that response, it almost just means it's even more important for me to choose me every day.
Yeah.
And so I have to choose myself first before they can choose me. And that's not a practice, again, that's like one and done. Self-coronation and self-given permission is not something you can do once. I have to do it every fucking day. There's a lot to do every day as an artist. You got to choose yourself, you got to take care of yourself, but it is a practice that is never ending.
I wonder if there's also something that you feel or think about in terms of like noticing the ways in which you already are being chosen, because like
Mm.
there's always gonna like okay, now you've been published by this big publishing house, but there's always like further we can go with like, well, it's not legit until
Of
this and that
course.
happens, right?
Of
And then
course.
yeah, it's like, well, what about the my friend who read my thing and said it really moved them? Like, am I not validating that?
Yeah, beautiful. I think it can be a treadmill, can't it? Especially
Yeah.
once you start getting on the train. For example, like, you know, I've been very, very careful about how I assess how well this book is going because I know I'm the sort of person who absolutely could be like, I need this, we need to go this far. And then after I've got this, I need to go this. Like, I know that's my personality trait. And so I take care of myself to make sure that I'm not just asking for more and more and more. So I'm understanding that this book being out there and the way that it's already been received is so beautiful. I do not need to be on the New York Times bestseller list for this book to be a success. Again, this comes back around to me defining my success
Yeah.
and me having an understanding on my own terms, not their terms, as to what this book doing good means to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll keep searching just for more and more and more if we're not careful.
I feel like this may have already answered the question I was about to ask, but I'll ask it anyway just to see if there's anything else that comes to mind. So I was going to ask what like your path, your work, it's so much about I'm going to call it self-trust because that's what
Oh, I
the
love that.
podcast is
Yeah.
about. Yeah. Trusting yourself. And like as we're talking about, there's always a growing edge. Like this is not a destination type of thing.
Mm,
How would you describe like what is your growing edge at this point in your path with
mm.
leaning more and more deeply into trusting yourself as an artist, as a business person, as a human being?
It's such a beautiful question, Anna, and I don't have a very clear answer. And I think that's kind of maybe where I'm at. But I don't feel unsettled and I don't feel like I'm walking into the unknown. I know what I'm here to do. I trust that I will do it. I know I'm here to create and to tell stories and to help and be witness to other artists. And I know that that path is unfolding. And if I take baby step after baby step, Like it will reveal itself. And so I don't have any glorious like 5-year plans, and I don't have visions for where this book is going. I just know and I trust this purpose and this calling. And so I take it day by day.
Yeah. I don't know if you're a fan of the word surrender or not. Different people have different reactions to it. But I like, for me, that word
So
came
letting
up as,
go.
yeah.
I had no idea really what to expect with this book launch. And allowing myself to not know has been really beautiful. And I think
Yeah.
has been it's helped me, I think, because I see a lot of creatives, have expectations and have like ask a lot from their art. And I am not asking for a lot right now.
That's delicious. I'm drinking that in. So I've got 3 more questions, and the first of them is everything that ever comes out of your mouth already speaks to this, but what is a soapbox message that you're personally passionate about spreading through all the various work that you do?
Tricky. It's literally everything I say is me on a little soapbox with my signs, isn't it? Which one should I
Totally.
choose today? I think it would be you have been called.
Mm.
And I think understanding that what you really want to do is what you're really meant to do has been a big part of my journey. And if you have a calling to create, if you feel that like that pull to make stuff, like you have been called. And it was your birthright to make art. And you don't need to do anything to claim that right. It is yours right now. And I want you to take that seriously.
Thank you. On behalf of myself and everyone listening. For the person who is listening to this conversation, and maybe it's their first introduction to you and your work, and you've said things that have ignited a flame and inspired, and also with that inspiration, there's like fear and overwhelm and collapse, maybe even, like where do I even start? What words of encouragement do you have to that person who wants to step into their art, they're coming into alignment with themselves, all of that?
We as humans have such a proclivity for going big or going home. And I think especially after we're like really activated, like say you're incredibly activated after this conversation and you think, fuck, I've been ignoring my creative calling my whole life and I know this is something I'm meant to be doing. And you think, I better quit my job and buy 10 grand's worth of art supplies. And I'm just here to say that is a cool idea. And maybe one day you will do that, but it will not be today. And it doesn't need to be today. Creative mastery, creative abundance, and creative success is made by baby steps. If we take too big a steps, we get overwhelmed, we back the fuck up, we're overpromising, and we don't follow through. The way we cultivate a trusted creative practice is by taking baby steps. So there is only one job for you to do, and it is fucking tiny. And whatever tiny thing you can think of doing right now, I want you to halve it. I want you to do something you absolutely know that you could do. And then once you've done that, you can think of something else tiny to do. And this is how creative careers, creative abundance, creative joy is made. And there is no other way around it. And I will not hear anything else.
Woo!
I'm wearing a t-shirt that says small steps.
Small steps. Oh my gosh, that's so, so good. Yeah. And I've got to say, like, I have to remind myself of this 2,000 times a day.
Go big or go home. Like, I'm such a go big or go. Because I get excited. I'm like, let's do everything right now.
Yes. I get so excited. And then the excitement creates a bottleneck. And it's like, all right, we don't have to squelch it. We just got to like
I
slow
think
it down
it's about sitting down maybe with that excited part of ourselves and being like, oh my God, that is so cool. And like this idea will come to fruition, baby. And like, let's go. But also, what tiny thing could we do right now?
Yes. Yeah, it's not only about sitting down and having those conversations with the fearful part, right? It's also with the excited part.
Yes,
Yeah,
I think that's a great point. I've never thought about that before.
I love that. And finally, where can people find you, your work? Where can they go freaking buy tons of copies of this book?
Yes, let's go. So you can find my book, We Need Your Art. It's on Audible. You can listen to it. You can read it on your Kindle. You can buy a physical copy wherever it is you like to get your books. If you're near an independent bookstore, Oh, look at her. If you're near an independent bookstore, you can just go down and get it ordered in, which is a lovely way to support your indie bookstore near you. Or you can just Google it. She'll be wherever you want to get your books. But you can follow me on Instagram at Inspired to Write, and you can follow me on Substack, which is just my name, Amy McNee.
And you also offer courses and all
I
kinds.
do. I
Like,
have some
do you
courses.
want to talk about
I've
that
got
stuff
so
too?
much stuff going on,
You've got so much
all
stuff,
built by baby steps. I will have everyone know.
and so many other books folks can buy as
Yeah,
well.
I've got my fiction book babies, some historical fiction, bit raunchy, bit fun, very female centered. Again, you can just Google Amie McNee books and you'll find them online. And on my website, we've got courses and ways for me to support you and take care of you. And that's just amiemcnee.com.
Fantastic. Go out and buy the book, people. Amy, this has been just the thrill of my year so far. Thank you so much for being
My
here. It's
pleasure.
such a joy to get to meet
It
you
was
and chat
such a
with you.
joy. I'm so grateful. Thank you for a beautiful hour.
Thank you so much. If you enjoyed today's episode, please do me a favor. Hit that follow button so you don't miss a thing and leave a rating or review. It helps more people find this show, and honestly, it makes my day. And if you're looking for more ways to trust yourself and start listening to that gut instinct of yours, come hang out with me on Instagram at Anna_Holtzman. Let's keep the conversation going. Thanks so much for listening, and until next time, trust yourself. You've got this.